have all the momentum. We have all the energy.
It's about the future direction of our country.
It's jobs, it's opportunities, it's affordable health care.
I think Georgians heard our message and they responded, and I'm deeply grateful.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Jeff Hullinger. The race for the White House ends with a new president, Joe Biden. But for Georgia voters, there are big decisions looming. 2 Senate runoffs. Democratic Party challenger, the Reverend Raphael Warnock, challenges the appointed incumbent, Senator Kelly Loeffler, and incumbent Republican, Senator David Perdue, versus the Democrat, Jon Ossoff. Both runoffs are scheduled for January 5th, so we have a ways to go. We begin this morning with 11Alive Reveal investigator Andy Parati joining us from the state capitol. And Andy, we are here because none of the 4 candidates has 50% of the votes in their races.
Jeff, you're right, and because they did not reach that threshold, that means these races are headed to a runoff. So while the rest of the country has stopped seeing campaigning and political ads, here in Georgia, you can expect to see a lot more of it.
Senator David Perdue profited from the pandemic.
A political rematch underway in Georgia with attack ads already on air.
News reports recently uncovered that Jon Ossoff's being paid.
The outcome could determine who controls the U.S. Senate. It includes an unprecedented 2 U.S. Senate runoffs in the same state at the same time. The first race led by incumbent Republican Senator Kelly Loeffler, a businesswoman appointed by Governor Brian Kemp in December 2019, following former Senator Johnny Isakson's retirement.
My team, they get out of bed every day, energized to serve all Georgians, not just Republicans.
Well, hello, everybody.
And Democrat Raphael Warnock, senior pastor of Ebenezer Baptist Church, where Martin Luther King Jr. preached.
So we must stand together. We must fight together. We must struggle together. We must pray together. We must stay together. We must stick together. It's night right now, but morning will surely come.
The other race, incumbent Republican Senator David Perdue, a former CEO of a Fortune 500 company.
You know how I will vote. You know what I've accomplished.
And Democrat Jon Ossoff, a former investigative reporter. So far, none of them have received more than 50% of the vote in their races, as the state requires to declare a winner. Long considered Republican-secured seats, but Democrats believe they have a chance after a changing tide of politics and demographics in Georgia.
Georgia has become younger and more diverse every day of the last decade.
Democrats need to win both of Georgia's seats to gain control of the U.S. Senate. It would create a 50-50 split in the chamber. Vice President-elect Kamala Harris would cast tie-breaking votes. Now, there are some key dates that you need to know about if you plan to vote in the upcoming runoff. First, voters can request an absentee ballot starting November 18th. The deadline to register to vote before the runoff is December 7th. Early voting for the runoff will begin December 14th, and the official runoff election is scheduled January 5th. That means Georgians can expect to see an onslaught of political ads for the next 58 days. Jeff?
Oh, that's something I'm sure a lot of people love hearing this morning. Thank you, Andy. Georgia is one of 2 states, along with Louisiana, that requires a runoff if a candidate does not get 50% plus 1 vote. Democrats and Republicans will stake their hopes on what is sure to be a very expensive and a high-profile pair of runoffs. History favors the Republicans here. 11Alive's Doug Richards is live with more on what has happened. And we have seen this play out before. But again, Doug, this is 2020, so who knows what we're going to be looking at.
Yeah, it's been a while. Democrats were certainly jubilant when Democrat Jon Ossoff made it into, or appeared to make it into, a runoff with David Perdue after Perdue fell below 50%. But Republicans also have reason to be a little confident, at least going into this runoff. Democrats vote reliably in November elections, but history shows that Democrats do not turn out nearly as well as Republicans in runoffs. And we can go back to 2008, for example, when Republican Senator Saxby Chambliss won in November but was still forced into a runoff with Democrat Jim Martin. That runoff on the Tuesday after Thanksgiving saw Martin's vote total plunge by 48%. Chambliss, his vote total dropped only by 34%, and that returned the Republican to his seat.
Democrats tend to show up at a much lower rate. They do not participate in runoff elections as they do in generals. It's historical fact. Nobody's actually ever found a really good reason why. It just happens. The other thing that Democrats need to worry about is that Donald Trump brought out a lot of people for this general election. He will not be on the ballot in January, and that is going to change the dynamic a lot.
In 1992, incumbent Democratic U.S. Senator Wyche Fowler beat Republican Paul Coverdell in the November election, but again was forced into a runoff. And during that runoff, Fowler's vote total dropped by 44%. Coverdell's vote total only dropped by 41%. And as a result, Coverdell was able to slip past Fowler in that runoff in order to make it into the U.S. Senate and unseat Fowler. Now, both of those elections we talked about, 1992 and 2004, were also pivotal presidential elections where Democrats won the presidency, and then the runoff came later, and more Democrats decided to stay home for those particular runoffs. Times have changed, Jeff, obviously, and it's unclear whether that could happen again, but this is something that both parties will be watching out for. Back to you.
You know, you bring up that 1992 race. Everybody always talks about how I wish that politics were like they used to be, when they were genteel and they were respectful. That 92 battle between Fowler and Coverdell was about as rough and rowdy as it gets, and it would fit in very, very well in modern America these days. Doug Richards live for us this morning. Doug, thank you. With both of Georgia's seats up for grabs, so is the Senate's balance of power. Christy Diaz in our newsroom looking at the numbers county by county. Christy?
Hey, Jeff. So you can see how evenly split it is right now. 48 Democrats and 48 Republicans currently as it sits right now. But we still have 4 Senate seats up for grabs. Georgia has 2 of them. They're right here on the board. You see, one is a red circle because currently Republican incumbent David Perdue leads by a short margin. He will be facing Jon Ossoff in January. And then you've got this circle over here representing the other runoff race between Raphael Warnock and Kelly Loeffler. In this case, this circle is blue because Warnock is currently above. Let's take a closer look at these races. So right now, Perdue is ahead by just 1.82% and only about 90,295 votes. Okay, so now if we go to the other one between Warnock and Loeffler, Warnock is ahead by about 341,000 votes and some change. Crazy to think about. And then before I go back to you, Jeff, one thing that I noticed this morning, we talked a lot about voter turnout. It's much harder to get people to come out in a runoff election. Right now, we are breaking some records in Georgia, so it will be very interesting to see how many people we can get back out to vote.
Christy Diaz with the numbers, the breakdown. Thank you. When we come back, I'm joined by Dr. Bernice King, the CEO of the King Center, for her take on a shift in Georgia politics from red to blue and the importance of our state in the next 2 months. You're watching Decision Georgia. And welcome back, everyone. I'm Jeff Hullinger. It has been 24 hours since the Associated Press and major networks, including NBC, called the presidential race for Joe Biden. President-elect Biden's lead in Georgia is now more than 10,000 votes, although a recount is on the way, and it gives Georgia Democrats hope for the 2 remaining Senate runoffs. But Republicans look at their successful history in runoff elections, particularly recently, and appear confident about what looms ahead for January 5th. Joining me right now is Dr. Bernice King, the CEO of the King Center. Dr. King, thanks for being with us on this Sunday morning. We really appreciate it. Doug Richards did a story a couple of minutes ago about how Democrats traditionally in these Senate runoffs have not shown up as much as Republicans. Do you think that changes this time around, and how does that happen in your estimation?
Well, as the CEO of the King Center, of course, I have to remain nonpartisan in answering this question. But I think what's important this time is that people wanted to vote their conscience. People are looking for change all across this nation. including in their various states. And so, I think that, this time people are going to show up the polls in ways that are unimaginable. We've already seen that in the presidential election. And so I'm excited that people have awakened to their responsibility as citizens of these United States to exercise that sacred right to vote and realize that we have a voice. And we can never forget that. We can never go back to the days where we see it as an option.
I'm looking this morning during the commercial break. I saw a Twitter note that Stacey Abrams says in Fair Fight, she has raised $3.5 million in the last 2 days. You can't say enough about what her impact has been on the race, not only in Georgia, but around the country, of getting people involved. Sort of a follow-up to the late Congressman John Lewis, who was so adamant, so passionate for all of his life about trying to make sure that everybody had the opportunity to vote in this country.
Yeah, and I honor Stacey Abrams. She turned a situation where she felt and possibly the election was taken away from her. She turned that into a very strong positive. And I honor her for that. I respect her for that. An amazing job that she did of organizing, because what really makes the difference in any election, what makes the difference in even issues that we're being faced with in this nation, is something that my father often reminded us of in his writing, in particular, Where Do We Go From Here? Chaos or Community. He said, our nettlesome task would be to organize our strength into compelling power. So that the government can't elude our demands, or I say the people in power can't elude our demands. And she certainly organized that strength all across, not just Georgia, but this nation. So I don't think people need to forget that Fair Fight is beyond Georgia.
Yeah,
and she is to be applauded for those efforts to awaken people to their citizenship responsibility, and not just leading them out there. Because so often, especially historically in the African-American community, we focus on, just getting people to vote. Sure. But in this instance, because there's been issues around voter suppression and even voter integrity, she was there the entire time. She gave people processes and procedures to follow. They had a safe space and a safe place to go.
But these are such complicated times. I mean, we talk about change. Joe Biden gets 74 million, Donald Trump gets 70 million. I mean, that's a lot of people on the other side. A divided nation, despite the pandemic, despite all that we have seen over the course of the last year. That sort of idealism, left and right, remains very much entrenched at this point.
Yes, it very much is. And so we have to change our strategy. Our strategy now has to do more work grassroots across our party lines. We focus a lot across legislative and political party lines, but we need to begin to cross party lines in our communities. And I think we can get beyond the divisiveness. We're going to always vote whatever party is there. As long as we have a two-party system primarily, people are going to vote Democrat or Republican. But we don't have to be divisive in the way we approach our political beliefs and how we engage our government. And so that's what's going to be important. How do we cross our lines and begin to engage each other and understand each other and find a pathway that is a win-win pathway?
Dr. Bernice King, CEO of the King Center, on this Sunday morning. Thanks for being with us. We greatly appreciate it.
Thank you.
Still ahead, many Georgia counties are working to certify their elections, but in a few cases they are dealing with glitches and a whole lot of ballots. An update when Decision Georgia returns.
We said it'd be a close one. By George, we've predicted that right.
The late Senator Paul Coverdale, back in 1992, he died of a heart attack in 2000. But he, on that night, defeated Wyche Fowler. It was the first U.S. Senate runoff in Georgia history, and it went to the Republican over the Democrat. And part of the reason that no decision certainly has not been rendered as of yet, they have not certified the elections, including two of the most populous in the state, between technical issues, glitches, and an overwhelming amount of ballots. Gwinnett County continues to tally up the votes, trying to figure out where they are going. And Fulton had to redo some of what they had already begun. Palacero has been tracking the ballot complications. She joins us from State Farm Arena. How about this morning, Pala? How different does it look than, say, 24 hours ago?
Well, we've certainly made progress here in Fulton County, but you mentioned it. Not only is Fulton County experiencing some technical issues, so is Gwinnett County. But here at State Farm Arena, just yesterday, they had to rescan more than 300 ballots because of a technical issue. We know that that process is now over. It is finished, so that is why we have made some progress here. You know, in a tweet, the Secretary of State said Fulton County found a problem with the reporting from Friday's work, so it sent an on-site monitor and investigators to oversee the rescanning of ballots. Elections Director Richard Barron says those 342 ballots were originally scanned on Friday, but the results just didn't transfer to the server and a smaller number of ballots were not scanned. They had observers from both political parties oversee that process, which normally happens as part of the review process before the county certifies votes.
Our numbers balance, so this is one of those things that you want to make sure you do, and that's why you have time between Election Day and certification. So it's part of the process.
Now, as for Gwinnett County, you know, election workers have had to deal with 3 separate issues this week alone, and I know they told me that they have more technicians on site. They had several yesterday, and I know they're planning on reviewing those provisional ballots tomorrow, so hopefully we'll see some more numbers from that county as well.
You know, some things never change. Technology improves, but trying to count the vote has always been difficult in this country going back generations, and it still is in 2020. Palacero outside of State Farm Arena in downtown Atlanta. Thanks. When Decision Georgia returns, our 11Alive political analysts break down the upcoming runoffs, when the eyes of the political world and the advertising dollars will be focused on Georgia.
As Republicans, we're going to regroup. We're going to decide the direction which our party needs to go nationally. If we need to change direction on some issues, we need to do that.
The times change, the words don't. Senator Saxby Chambliss in 2008, after a convincing win over the Democrat Jim Martin, who lives in town Atlanta, in a runoff, the last Senate runoff in Georgia. That was until now. Let's dig deeper into the upcoming runoff when both of Georgia's U.S. Senate seats are at stake. Joining me now, 11Alive political analyst Theron Johnson and Mike Hassinger are here. Theron, Democrats feeling pretty good about what transpired on Tuesday, but why should they also feel good about this runoff despite the history of politics over the last 30 years in Atlanta and Georgia?
Well, we should feel really good because, one, you know, right now, as the votes are still being counted, Joe Biden is leading Georgia. And it ultimately was the Biden coalition that I think was able to help Jon Ossoff make it into the runoff with David Perdue. Now, historically, listen, we have not done as well as we wanted to do in runoffs, but this time, Jeff, is different. We're going to have the resources, we got the momentum, and hopefully we'll have a president-elect that can be very, very beneficial to us in the state.
Mike, a runoff very different from a general election. We saw that earlier in this broadcast in Doug Richards' story. Are Republicans at all concerned about getting a turnout as well for these seats in January?
Oh, absolutely. If they're not, they ought to be. These are two incumbent senators who've been forced to runoffs. You never want to be an incumbent in a runoff in any race whatsoever. And, you know, uneasy lies the head that wears the crown, in this case, crowns. They have to turn out and put together a new strategy for countering what has been a very effective voter turnout model built by Stacey Abrams and New Power Georgia and all of the Democrat forces that have aligned to create such a high Democrat turnout.
Theron, do you think the Democrats' message will be different, or will it be less centered on the individual opponent and more so on trying to get people out to the polls?
I think it's going to be very Georgia-specific, tailored towards the Republicans that they're running against. Listen, we know that this race is going to be nationalized. It could determine the power of the United States Senate. And so I think you'll see both candidates, Ossoff and Warnock, be a little bit more on the attack. But look at what Warnock's doing already. He's sort of preparing Georgians for what's to come as far as some of the negative ads.
Mike, how do you think it plays out? Look into your crystal ball. You've been good at that for us over the years. Try it again.
I'm sorry, Jeff, I lost you there for a second. I thought you were trying to get me to try to make a prediction. I predict a lot of commercials and a lot of ad spending in Georgia.
Theron, how about you? We have seconds left. How do you see this playing out?
I think ultimately we will win. I think it's going to be largely of what we just heard and as far as turnout.
Theron Johnson, Mike Hassinger, thank you. We appreciate you being with us. And thank you for watching this morning. We'll have complete coverage on 11alive.com of all the races.